Welcome to MojoPlays, and today we're looking at 10 games that tried to modernize their series and failed spectacularly.
My God, who the hell am I?
Turo.
What is this place?
The Turo series on the N64 was a hit with both fans and critics alike. It was often compared to the benchmark console FPS, GoldenEye 007 at the time, with its impressive graphics, level design, tight gameplay, and innovative game mechanics. The 2008 reboot of the franchise left most of that behind, and instead of continuing the mythological aspect of the original series, players took on the role of a generic soldier. The inventive weapons of the original were replaced by the standard assortment of modern warfare-style gunplay and mechanics. When even the admittedly cool dinosaurs can't save your shooter about fighting dinosaurs, this is a reboot that completely misses what made the original games so iconic.
That's enough, son.
Get off! I'm not afraid of him. I'm not afraid of you. This ain't over, Turok.
Saints Row.
I've told you before, the idols are trying to build a post-capitalist society where money is not a concept.
Yeah? Then why don't you go run off and join the commune?
I'm into showering.
The only real competitor to GTA's crown, the Saints Row series went through numerous iterations and managed to split the fanbase, with some fans preferring the more realistic take in Saints Row 2, and others leaning more towards the over-the-top nature of Saints Row III. But with their 2022 reboot, Volition attempted to find a balance between the two and managed to please no one. Not only was the game filled with a myriad of bugs and glitches, but most of the main characters were just unlikable. It felt like the developers trying too hard to appeal to a new, younger generation, as well as a story and world that didn't appeal to longtime fans of the series. While the game was mechanically competent, it just wasn't fun, which is the main draw of the Saints Row series and resulted in a reboot that completely lost its identity.
Well, you didn't die. All in all, not a bad start.
Spy Hunter, Nowhere to Run.
Nothing personal. Just following orders.
Since when do you follow orders?
Give me a good reason not to. Maybe I won't.
While the Spy Hunter series has certainly seen its share of reboots throughout the years, Nowhere to Run attempted to tap into the more cinematic and Hollywood-style video games we're heading towards, but ended up in straight-to-DVD B-movie territory instead. The Spy Hunter series made no secrets about their James Bond inspirations, so naturally when it came time for a Hollywood-style adaptation of the franchise, they got Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as their leading man.
Didn't want you to miss your train.
Letting players get out of the car and explore the world had become standard by this point, but ended up being the worst aspect of an already disappointing entry in a beloved franchise. With bland and repetitive gameplay, even the surprisingly solid story and The Rock's usual charm couldn't save this spy from getting burned, and the franchise has been mostly MIA ever since.
Hell, give me an order.
You don't follow orders.
I can make an exception.
Okay, here's one you can handle. Watch out.
Frogger, Hes Back. The simplicity of Frogger was most likely its biggest draw during the game's initial release, where your only goal was to help the poor little froggy cross the road to the other side while surviving various obstacles. Proving that not every game's formula needs an update, this is one road Frogger should have avoided entirely. While the game did feature some interesting and creative level designs, everything else about the game was lackluster, especially the game's controls, which actively fought against the player at every turn. They effectively made the game and its need for precision jumps nearly unplayable and unfairly increased the game's overall difficulty. Why did the frog cross the road? To get away from this reboot. Dungeon Keeper. The original 1997 Dungeon Keeper saw players building and managing their dungeons to keep the hero away from the treasures within. Even today, Dungeon Keeper has a loyal fan base, but But because EA was involved, naturally the newest entry became an over-monetized mess even by mobile standards. Instead of the original strategic dungeon building gameplay, EA turned the title into a mobile tower defense game. This meant that players were forced to wait extortionist amounts of time or fork over real-world cash for the game's multiple in-game currencies necessary for building traps and generally playing the game at all. Naturally, this didn't go over well with fans of the series or critics, and the game was rightfully lambasted for its greedy practices. Just because you're the bad guy doesn't mean you have to be the bad guy. Golden Axe Beast Rider.
Great Lord, your servant beseeches you. Find her worthy.
Yet another unneeded update to a classic franchise, the Golden Axe games were a staple of arcades and Sega Genesises everywhere, and was one of the early pioneers in multiplayer gaming. The simple hack-and-slash gameplay made the game easy to pick up and play, so naturally the series was a perfect fit for a gritty 3D single-player reboot, right? The game attempted to appeal to an older audience with an over-sexualized main character, as well as buckets of blood and gore, but forgot to include engaging gameplay or a meaningful story. While many other beat-em-ups have successfully made the transition into 3D, Beast Rider somehow made Golden Axe's simple and fun combat boring, and the game's bland graphics and repetitive gameplay were made even worse by the game's horrendous control design.
Hold if you value your life. What master do you serve?
Space Raiders. Speaking of unnecessary reboots, Space Invaders has been an industry icon since it first debuted in 1978, and virtually nothing has needed to be updated or changed since its initial release. Why then did developer Taito feel the need to reboot or change up a formula that had been perfect for nearly 3 decades by that point is anyone's guess. Switching to a third-person perspective and putting players on ground level instead of their trusty ship, but maintaining the original game's shooting mechanics and gameplay, somehow made the original's tried-and-true gameplay feel repetitive. It's a poor imitation of its predecessor, full of pointless cinematics, terrible graphics, and drab, lifeless environments. It's no wonder they didn't have the nerve to use the Space Invaders name.
What do you want, Invader? Invader? You are the invader!
Bionic Commando.
Are you in or out?
We've still got one problem.
That's been taken care of.
There's definitely an ongoing trend with these mid-2000s reboots and developers feeling the need to take an established property and give it a dark and mature overhaul. And while it has worked on occasion, this list has more than proved it doesn't work for everything. Bionic Commando is probably the closest to a decent game on our list with its surprisingly solid graphics and swinging mechanics, but is held back by one major core component of its reboot: the story. This might not be a deal breaker for some, but the bizarre story of Rad Spencer investigating the disappearance of his wife takes a major twist when he discovers she sacrificed herself to make his bionic arm.
Nathan's had an accident, Mrs. Spencer.
Oh my God!
You need to come with me.
Is he gonna be okay?
With your help, he will.
Even by video game standards, this one's a bit of a stretch. Thankfully, alongside the reboot, fans got a more traditional 2D Bionic Commando game that proved successful enough it even earned itself a sequel.
I never want you to be involved in this.
It's okay. I'll always be by your side.
Alone in the Dark.
Who are you? What have you done to her?
She's one of my hosts now, as you once were. You, my most perfect puppet.
The true granddaddy of survival horror, the impact of Alone in the Dark on the genre it helped to create cannot be understated, with the likes of Silent Hill and Resident Evil taking direct inspiration from it. While the 2008 reboot had good intentions, The title's poor implementation of its new mechanics only aided in its fall into obscurity. Taking an episodic approach to the game's poorly written and designed narrative didn't do the game any favors, and its focus on combat and set-piece moments lost what made the series an icon to begin with. Moving Edward Carnby out of the mansion and into large cityscape environments didn't lend itself to many scares either, completely undermining the core of the Alone in the Dark series. The fire effects remain impressive even today, however, as does the game's inventory system.
Jesus, Sarah. You're getting worse than me.
Bomberman Act Zero. As we keep constantly mentioning, everything in the mid-2000s needed to be dark and gritty no matter the source material. So seemingly for this reason alone, Hudson Soft decided to take the cute and cartoony Bomberman and give him a makeover to better reflect the dark times of the 2000s, apparently. Even this could have probably been forgiven had the core gameplay remained the same, but along with the game's decidedly more violent tone was a myriad of bizarre design decisions such as first person. Coupled with ugly and poorly designed environments and long load times, the game lost the soul of what makes the Bomberman games so enjoyable. Thankfully, the series returned to its roots and never looked back, but we almost lost the entire Bomberman franchise to the dark timeline. Which video game reboot do you think was the biggest failure? Let us know in the comments below. Did you enjoy this video? Check out these other clips from MojoPlays, and be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos.